A jealous mistress poisons a pregnant wife's tea, but what unfolds next will leave you speechless. From betrayal in a mansion to a shocking courtroom confession, this true-life drama reveals the darkest sides of love, ambition, and redemption. Will the innocent survive? Will the guilty pay the price? You won't believe how it ends. Where are you watching from? Let us know in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe for more gripping stories that will keep you hooked till the very last word. They say betrayal doesn't always roar. It often whispers, hidden in soft glances, half smiles, and sips of tea. Looking back, I wish I'd paid more attention to the stillness between Charles and me. It's funny how a life that looks perfect from the outside can be slowly unraveling thread by thread, and no one, not even the person living it, sees it coming until it's too late. My name is Grace Walker. Just a year ago, I thought I had everything. I was 29, married to Charles Walker, one of the most respected business tycoons on the East Coast. At 43, Charles had already built a global empire and a name that commanded attention in every room. We lived in a sprawling estate in Cedar Grove, a town where hedges were trimmed to perfection and secrets hid behind imported drapery. Charles and I met 3 years ago at a fundraiser for an educational nonprofit. I was a school teacher back then, modest income, simple life, the kind who always made her own coffee instead of buying it. He said he was drawn to my groundedness. I think he liked that I didn't fawn over his wealth the way most women did. Our romance was fast and intense. 6 months after we met, I left the classroom behind and became Mrs. Walker. The wedding was something out of a magazine: white roses, a string quartet, and champagne fountains. But none of those things mattered to me. All I wanted was him. When I found out I was pregnant last spring, I cried with joy. I thought it would bring us even closer. I imagined Charles painting the nursery with me, talking baby names late into the night, rushing home from meetings to feel the baby kick. But something shifted instead. He became distant, not cruel, not cold, just absent. He started staying late at the office, attending events alone, offering tight smiles and rushed kisses. I told myself it was stress. After all, his company was expanding, and we were hosting more social functions than ever. The Harrington Gala, the Cedar Grove Heritage Ball, the Grandview Philanthropy Banquet. Always another room full of important people, and always Charles playing the charming host while I tried to keep my feet from swelling in my heels. It was during one of these events, a charity brunch for the Children's Literacy Fund, that I first saw her. Vanessa Lame. She arrived on the arm of David Monroe, an investor friend of Charles's. She wore an ivory dress that hugged every curve like it had been stitched directly onto her body. Her hair was pinned in soft curls, and her eyes sparkled, not with warmth but with something colder. Calculated, dangerous. I remember standing near the rose trellis, greeting guests as they arrived. My belly had just started to show, and I was adjusting to that awkward phase where nothing in my closet fit quite right. I spotted Charles near the fountain, his back stiffening when David approached with Vanessa. I couldn't hear their conversation from where I stood, but when Charles turned and saw me watching, he gave me a smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. Later that afternoon, I asked him about her. "Who was that woman with David?" I said, trying to sound casual. "Oh, her? That's Vanessa Lame." He replied too quickly. "She's in nonprofit work, or media, something like that. David's +1, I think." "She's very beautiful," I said. He just nodded, poured himself another glass of wine, and changed the subject. That was the first time I felt it, a flicker of something I couldn't name. Not suspicion exactly, just misalignment. Weeks passed, and the strange distance between us grew. Charles was present, but never really with me. He'd rest his hand on my back at parties and smile for photos, but in private, he seemed consumed by something else. I caught him once, staring into his phone with an expression that flickered between desire and regret. When I asked what he was looking at, he muttered something about an email from his lawyer. And still, I convinced myself it was the stress of impending fatherhood. I bought baby clothes and made Pinterest boards for nursery themes. I went to prenatal yoga. I made his favorite meals. I smiled when he came home late, even when I wanted to cry. I didn't know then that Vanessa had already started slipping into the shadows of our life. I didn't know that while I was planning our baby's future, she was planning to erase mine. But there were signs. Subtle ones. The way Charles's phone always seemed to be on silent. How he would leave the room to take calls. The way he smelled faintly of a different perfume some nights. Not mine, not any of the brands I wore. I should have trusted my instincts. One evening, I brewed myself a cup of chamomile tea before bed. My stomach had been unsettled, and I hoped it would calm me. Charles was upstairs already, claiming exhaustion. As I stirred in a spoonful of honey, I paused. The tea smelled slightly off, earthier, bitter. But I shrugged it off. A new blend, perhaps. Molly, my assistant, had just ordered some fresh teas last week. I drank it anyway. That was the beginning, the first thread pulled from the tapestry of our lives. I didn't know that across town, in a penthouse filled with white orchids and gold fixtures, Vanessa Lane was sitting with her legs crossed, a glass of wine in her hand, and a plan blooming behind her eyes. She wanted everything I had, my husband, my house, my future, and she believed I stood in the way. I thought the tea would soothe me that night. Instead, it would set the stage for the betrayal that nearly took my life. And the worst part? I had invited it into my home with a smile. Because betrayal doesn't always enter with a bang. Sometimes it comes dressed in silk and heels, offering compliments and sipping champagne. Sometimes it smells like jasmine and lavender, and sometimes it hides behind the man you love most in the world. They say jealousy doesn't strike like lightning, it seeps in, slow and poisonous, like water beneath a cracked foundation. My name is Vanessa Lane, and if you're looking for a villain, then fine, paint me as one. But know this. Nothing in this world is handed to women like me. You take it, or you get left behind. I wasn't born into country clubs and legacy trust funds like Grace Walker. No, I learned early how to read a room, how to charm a man with my eyes and walk out with more than he expected to give. I was born with ambition in my veins, and I sharpened it until it glittered. So when I met Charles Walker, handsome, rich, powerful, I didn't just see a man, I saw a future. He noticed me first at a gala in Midtown. I wore emerald silk, my mother's earrings, and a scent that promised trouble. Charles was magnetic, but I knew how to hold his gaze just long enough to spark something without setting off alarms. We danced once. That was all. His wife, Grace, wasn't there. Morning sickness, someone said. Poor thing. We didn't sleep together that night. That came later, after casual encounters at luncheons, after mutual friends found excuses to invite us both to the same art shows, the same charity balls. He was hesitant at first, said he had a wife, a baby on the way. I told him I wasn't looking for love. Just a little freedom. He laughed. God, that laugh. I could feel the guilt rise in him like steam, but he kept coming back. I made sure of it. Charles thought he was controlling the affair. Thought he could compartmentalize his life, like he did his businesses. Wife in one corner, mistress in the other. But I knew better. I knew men like him crack when pressure builds. And Grace, sweet, naive Grace, was just the kind of woman who'd forgive anything, because she didn't think betrayal was in his nature. That's what made her weak. But I didn't want to be just the other woman forever. Charles talked about leaving her. Late at night, in hotel rooms with our clothes scattered on the floor, he'd whisper things like, "You're the only one who really sees me," or "I wish I'd met you first." And I believed him. Maybe not all the way, but enough. Enough to start picturing my name on the deed to that mansion in Cedar Grove. Enough to start seeing myself as the future Mrs. Walker. And then, she got pregnant. That changed everything. Charles pulled back. Physically, emotionally. He stopped replying to my messages as quickly. Canceled a weekend trip to Aspen. The baby gave him a new anchor, and suddenly I could feel myself drifting farther from shore. I was being replaced before I ever truly arrived. That was when the idea first bloomed. Not fully formed, just a seed. But it took root quickly. I began to wonder, what if things weren't so perfect in the Walker household? What if Grace's pregnancy didn't go smoothly? What if Charles found himself leaning on someone else during that storm? I didn't need to do anything drastic. Just nudge things. Complications happen in pregnancy all the time. Stress, fatigue, dizziness, miscarriages. I started researching everything I could. I wasn't going to harm her, just make her weak enough that Charles would start seeing me as the stronger option. My first step? Molly Green, Grace's assistant. A plain little thing, always hovering near the edge of conversations like a houseplant no one watered. I found her sketching in the back room of an art gallery downtown, lost in a notebook full of pencil drawings. I complimented her style, told her she had talent, that I had connections. She blushed like a schoolgirl. It was too easy. Over lattes and compliments, I drew her out. I learned everything I needed. Grace's favorite tea, jasmine lavender. Her routine, garden walks in the morning, naps in the afternoon, doctor visits every other Thursday. I even got her prenatal vitamin brand. Molly thought we were friends. She thought I admired her. I used her like a key. I had a connection from years ago, someone who worked in natural remedies, though that's a polite term. I called him, told him I needed something gentle, undetectable. Nothing lethal, just disruptive. He didn't ask questions. For $5,000, he gave me a vial of clear liquid in a black velvet pouch. Slow reacting, he said. Won't show up on most tests unless you're looking real close. The moment I held that vial, I felt a flutter of fear. It would have been easy to stop, to toss it down the drain and go back to being a woman waiting for texts that never came. But then I thought about Grace, glowing, pregnant, living in my future, and I saw red. The next week, I told Molly I wanted to surprise Grace with a small sketch for her birthday. Something personal, something from a friend of David's. She lit up at the idea, said I could stop by the house that Thursday when Grace would be out for a checkup. I smiled. She had no idea what she'd done. I dressed down that day. Neutral coat, scarf around my head, no makeup. I parked 2 blocks away and walked through the back garden entrance Molly had told me about. She left the door unlocked. I entered the butler's pantry without a sound, heart hammering. The tea canisters sat neatly on a glass shelf. I found the one labeled lavender jasmine, Grace's favorite. I unscrewed the top, the scent wafting out like perfume. Slowly, carefully, I tipped in a spoonful of the liquid, letting it soak the top layer of leaves. Just enough to blend. Just enough to start the shift. I resealed the tin, replaced it, and left without a trace. That night, I waited for news. Nothing came. The next day I heard from Molly that Grace had felt a little off and gone to bed early. That was enough to make my heart race with possibility. I kept my distance for a while, watching from afar. Molly would text me updates. Grace was more tired lately, sometimes dizzy. The doctor didn't know why. Perfect. But Charles didn't turn to me the way I expected. He canceled trips, started working from home more. I thought he'd retreat, but instead he clung to her. It wasn't working. So I recalculated. Grace's birthday was coming up. A lavish party at the estate. The guest list would be long. Molly said they were serving tea with dessert, Grace's favorite blend. It would be the perfect opportunity to raise the dose. Enough to cause a collapse. Not death, just drama. Just fear. Enough to make Charles question everything. And I, Vanessa Lane, would be waiting in the wings to offer him comfort, and finally, a future. The morning of my birthday arrived with the soft trill of birds outside the window and the faint scent of lilies wafting through the open balcony doors. I was 30 years old, 7 months pregnant, and trying, desperately, to hold my marriage together with threads thinner than spider silk. Charles had been more attentive these past few weeks. He stayed home more, canceled meetings, even offered to rub my feet at night. But there was something haunted behind his eyes, something unspoken. I wanted to believe the tension between us was merely the weight of responsibility, of a child on the way. But I had stopped trusting simple explanations. The house was alive with motion that morning. Staff hurried down hallways with trays of fresh fruit and polished silverware. String musicians arrived to rehearse in the east drawing room, and white-gloved florists carried enormous bouquets into the ballroom. Charles had gone above and beyond, too far, almost. The entire estate shimmered like a set from a royal wedding. And yet, beneath the surface of the celebration, I felt an undercurrent of unease. Still, I dressed with care. My emerald silk gown clung to me in all the right places and softened where I needed grace. I wore my mother's sapphire earrings and touched my belly gently before stepping out. I reminded myself to smile. Today, I needed to look radiant, needed the world to believe the Walkers were thriving, even if the truth was far more fragile. Guests arrived in waves. Politicians, CEOs, family friends with names that graced the covers of glossy magazines. I stood near the grand staircase, greeting them all with the poise I had learned over the past 3 years. "You look stunning," they said. "You're glowing," they added. I smiled and nodded, thanking them as if their compliments weren't daggers, each one reminding me how hard I was trying to keep the illusion intact. I didn't see her arrive at first. It was Molly who whispered, "Grace, David Monroe just walked in. He brought someone. I think she's that woman from the fundraiser." Vanessa Lane, of course. She stepped into the foyer like she owned it. Her black cocktail dress shimmered under the chandelier, and her lips curled with just the right amount of demureness. She clung to David's arm like a forgotten scarf, but her eyes swept the room like a predator. And when they landed on Charles, standing by the champagne fountain, his posture stiffened only for a second. It was enough. I moved toward them, trying to steady my breath. "Welcome," I said, extending my hand to her. Her touch was soft, cold, too cold. Her smile was perfect, but her eyes betrayed something sharp beneath the surface. "Grace," she purred. "I've heard so much about you. What a beautiful home. What a beautiful day." Her tone oozed admiration, but her gaze lingered too long on my stomach. "I'm glad you could join us," I replied with practiced warmth, though every instinct in my body screamed to take a step back. The afternoon unfolded like a well-rehearsed ballet. Music floated through the corridors, laughter danced between champagne glasses, and the scent of lavender candles coated every breath. I made my rounds, posed for photos, and accepted compliments about motherhood, marriage, and glowing skin. But behind every interaction, my mind kept drifting back to Vanessa. Where was she now? Who was she watching? Charles was different too, fidgety, distracted. At one point, I found him staring out the second-story window overlooking the garden. I approached him quietly and said, "You're not really here, are you?" He turned, startled, then offered a hollow smile. "Just tired. Too many speeches." But he didn't look tired. He looked guilty. I retreated, trying not to cry. The walls of our home, once a sanctuary, now felt like a stage, and I was the lead actress in a play I hadn't agreed to star in. Later in the evening, after toasts and hors d'oeuvres and far too many sugar-coated pleasantries, the moment came for my birthday cake. The staff brought it out, a 3-tiered chocolate masterpiece adorned with edible gold and white roses. Everyone gathered around, cameras ready. I made a wish. A simple one. Peace. And then I blew out the candles to polite applause. That's when the tea was brought. Molly handed me a delicate porcelain cup filled with jasmine lavender, my favorite blend. "Fresh from the kitchen," she said. I thanked her and took a sip. The warmth settled against my throat like an old friend, but the flavor was slightly off. A bitterness beneath the floral notes. I frowned but said nothing. I didn't want to ruin the moment. I took another sip. The first wave hit slowly, like a cloud dimming the sun. My vision blurred. My heartbeat quickened. Then came the pain, a low throb in my abdomen, sharp and wrong. I staggered, clutching my stomach. The teacup slipped from my fingers and shattered against the marble floor. Gasps echoed around me. Someone screamed. Hands reached for me, but it was Charles who caught me just before I hit the ground. My body went limp against him. His voice was distant, frantic. "Call an ambulance. Grace, stay with me, stay with me." Dr. Caldwell pushed through the crowd, kneeling beside me, her voice urgent. My ears rang. The chandelier above spun like a wheel of stars. Somewhere far away, I heard Molly crying. I tasted blood. I couldn't breathe. "Hold on," Charles kept whispering. "Please, God, hold on." As the medics arrived, I caught one last glimpse of Vanessa at the edge of the crowd. She clutched David's hand, her face pale with feigned shock. But her eyes weren't panicked. They were satisfied. And then everything went dark. The sterile white lights of the emergency room hummed above me like a distant storm as I drifted in and out of consciousness. I remember slivers of voices, urgent, clipped, full of tension. A nurse calling out vitals. Dr. Caldwell barking orders. Charles's voice trembling, whispering my name over and over again like a prayer slipping through cracked hands. I was cold. That's what I remember most. Not just the chill of the hospital bed or the IV in my arm, but something deeper. Bone cold, soul cold. Like my body was fighting not just poison, but the weight of betrayal that had silently crept into my life and curled itself around everything I thought was real. The poison. That word echoed inside my skull like a bell. I hadn't imagined it. Something had been wrong with that tea. I knew it the moment the bitterness hit my tongue. And now here I was, hooked up to machines, my baby's heartbeat playing faintly through a monitor beside me. every beep a small miracle. When I opened my eyes again, Charles was sitting beside me, his hand wrapped around mine like it was the only thing anchoring him to reality. His eyes were red-rimmed, and he looked years older than he had just hours before. "You're here," I rasped, my voice barely more than a whisper. He leaned in quickly, brushing my hair from my forehead. "Of course I'm here. I'm not going anywhere." The tears in his eyes weren't just fear, they were guilt. I could see it, feel it radiating from his skin like heat off pavement. He kissed my hand, but something inside me had shifted. I didn't pull away, but I didn't squeeze back either. Not yet. Dr. Caldwell entered with a team of nurses and a clipboard in her hand. Her expression was composed, but beneath it, I saw the tightness in her jaw. "You're stable," she said gently. "Your body is responding to treatment, but we detected a toxin in your system, Grace. Something not natural. It appears to have been ingested." She paused, looking between Charles and me. "We're running full toxicology, but we suspect it was introduced recently." Charles's grip tightened around my hand. "You're saying someone poisoned her?" Dr. Caldwell didn't answer directly. She didn't need to. A police officer stood outside my door, a detective. The realization hit me slowly. This wasn't just a medical emergency. It was a criminal investigation. I closed my eyes and tried to remember everything from the party. Every face, every gesture. And then, like a camera flash in a dark room, I saw her, Vanessa Lane, smiling too much, lurking near the edges, wearing a mask of innocence with eyes full of intent. Had I seen her near the butler's pantry earlier in the week? Had she lingered too long in the kitchen that day? Or was my mind filling in the blanks, rewriting the narrative now that I knew something had gone horribly wrong? Detective Mason arrived later that night. A tall man with tired eyes and a notebook he didn't put down once during the entire conversation. "We're looking into everyone who attended your birthday party," he said. "We've gathered the tea sample you drank, and preliminary lab results suggest it contained a rare compound, something not typically found in households. We're checking security footage, staff access records, and guest movements." I nodded, the room still spinning slightly around me. "There was a woman, a guest, Vanessa Lane. She came with David Monroe. I don't know her well, but something about her felt wrong." He scribbled her name down, then asked gently, "Did you see her near the tea? The pantry? The kitchen?" I hesitated. "I think earlier that week I may have seen her talking to Molly, my assistant, but I can't be sure. It could have been nothing." "That's okay. Every detail helps." After he left, Charles sat back down beside me. Silence stretched between us like a chasm. The guilt in his eyes was so loud it drowned out the machines. "I need to tell you something," he finally said. His voice cracked. "About Vanessa." I didn't speak, just looked at him. I had an affair. It started months ago. I never meant for it to become what it did. I thought it would end. I tried to end it, but I didn't. I didn't do it soon enough. I didn't think she would. Grace, I never thought. She tried to kill me," I said, my voice hollow, "and our baby." His face crumpled like paper. He dropped his head into his hands, unable to look at me. "I know, I'm so sorry, sorry." The word felt so small, so useless, like trying to stop a flood with a towel. I turned my face to the window. The sky outside was gray, bruised with the coming dawn. I thought of the mansion, once full of music and light, now just a stage for a tragedy I hadn't seen coming. I thought of Vanessa's smirk, of Charles's distant eyes, of the child inside me still holding on through all of it. The next morning, the toxicology report came in. Confirmed poisoning. The staff were interviewed, security footage reviewed, and finally, the pieces began to fall into place. Molly confessed to speaking with Vanessa, to letting her into the house. She sobbed as she told the detectives she thought Vanessa was just a friend, that she hadn't known what the woman was planning, that she was lonely, manipulated, tricked. I believed her. Molly wasn't cruel, just naive. But Vanessa? Vanessa had known exactly what she was doing. They searched her apartment, found the vial, matched the compound to the tea I drank. It was over. The police arrested her 3 days later, in a silk robe with her hair still pinned, as if she hadn't expected her carefully crafted world to fall apart. She denied everything, of course, said the poison was planted, that she was framed, that Charles had used her and now wanted to ruin her. But it didn't matter. The evidence was clear. Charles stood by me throughout the investigation. But I could see the weight of what he'd done, what he'd invited into our lives, pressing down on him like a stone on his chest. He cried often, spoke little, and I didn't know what to do with the ache in my own heart. Part of me still loved him, part of me hated him. But every time I heard our baby's heartbeat on the monitor, I knew one thing for certain. I had to survive this. And maybe, if the world didn't fall apart again, for me too. The following weeks passed in a haze of recovery and quiet tension, like the moments after a storm when the sky is clear but everything is still soaked. I remained in the hospital under Dr. Caldwell's close watch. The poison had weakened me, but the baby, our baby, was holding on, her heartbeat steady and miraculous. I lay there every day, one hand over my belly, willing her to keep fighting. I was too tired to think about the trial, or the tabloids, or the betrayal. All that mattered was keeping her safe. Charles was by my side every day. He barely left the room except to shower or take short walks down the hall. Sometimes he read aloud from a baby book. Other times he just sat in silence, staring at me as if afraid I might vanish. He brought flowers, favorite teas, all unopened, and even hired a harpist to play in the hospital garden where I could hear the music through the window. It was romantic. It was desperate. And it was too late. I didn't know what I felt for him anymore. Love still flickered there, but it was buried under ash and debris. He had invited a viper into our lives, and now, because of his mistakes, we were lucky to still have one. It would take more than flowers to fix that. Meanwhile, the investigation gained momentum. Vanessa's arrest had sent shockwaves through the social circle we'd once comfortably existed in. Some friends distanced themselves quietly, others called with concern, curiosity thinly veiled behind polite words. The press had already dubbed it the Tea Party scandal. Photographers camped outside the hospital gates, hoping for a glimpse of the miracle mother. I wanted no part in the circus. I wanted peace. But peace wouldn't come. A week after the arrest, I received an unexpected visitor, my father, Walter Middleton. He arrived with the same quiet authority he'd always carried, and a retired judge with a sharp mind and a softer heart than most people realized. He walked into my hospital room without announcing himself, set a bag of homemade lemon cookies on the table, and pulled up a chair. "You look stronger," he said, voice even. "I feel like I've been dragged through hell," I replied, forcing a smile. He nodded, looking down at his hands. I read the reports, talked to Dr. Caldwell, and to the detective Mason. I raised an eyebrow. "You interrogating people on my behalf now?" He shrugged. "Just protecting my daughter, something I should have done sooner." There was a long silence between us before he added, "Charles told me everything." I looked away, blinking back a sting in my eyes. "He's a fool," Dad said plainly, "but not evil, just lost." "Is that supposed to make me feel better?" I asked, my voice hollow. "No, it's just the truth." He leaned forward. "Grace, you don't have to decide anything right now. Not about him, not about the future. You've already made the only decision that matters. Staying alive. Keeping that baby safe. Everything else can wait." I nodded, unsure whether the tears on my cheeks were from gratitude or grief. Later that day, Harriet came. She looked like a ghost of the cheerful assistant I once knew. Pale, trembling, eyes swollen from crying. She stood at the doorway, hesitating until I motioned her in. "I'm sorry," she whispered before she even reached the bed. I sat up slightly, heart pounding. "I didn't know what she was planning," she continued. "She told me she was just an old friend of Charles, wanted to surprise him with something nice. She asked about your favorite tea, about your schedule. I swear I didn't think she was dangerous." I studied her face. She was young, naive, desperate for approval. Vanessa had seen that and twisted it like a blade. "You let her into our home," I said quietly. "More than once." "I know," she choked out, tears slipping down her face. "And I can never forgive myself for that. I didn't have the strength to hate her. Honestly, I didn't have the strength to hate anyone anymore. The poison had stripped everything down to bone and breath. What remained was survival." "I believe you didn't mean harm," I finally said, "but you made it easier for her, and that almost cost me everything." Harriet nodded. "I want to resign. I understand if you never want to see me again." But something in me resisted that. I'd been surrounded by liars and manipulators lately. Harriet wasn't one of them. She had been used, just like I had. "No," I said slowly. "You'll stay, Under supervision, you'll attend counseling, and you'll never ever give anyone access to me again without checking it with security. Her eyes widened. You're giving me another chance? I'm giving myself one. I need people I can rebuild trust with. Not more ghosts. She nodded quickly, sobbing again, but this time it felt different, like relief. The day before I was discharged, Charles approached me with a document. It's a full transfer of Harrington Industries' day-to-day operations, he said. I've appointed a CEO, someone we both trust. I'm stepping away. I looked at him, stunned. Why? Because I need to be here, he said. With you, for Amelia, for whatever chance we might still have. I didn't answer, but inside something flickered. Not forgiveness. Not yet, but maybe. Permission to begin healing. That night we sat in silence as the rain tapped gently against the window. Charles read aloud from a baby book, his voice soft, careful, almost reverent. My eyes drifted to my belly where Amelia moved beneath the skin, our daughter, still growing despite everything. She was the reason I breathed, the reason I had endured. And maybe, just maybe, she would be the reason we found our way forward. The trial date loomed, and with it, a tidal wave of attention. But in that quiet hospital room, surrounded by blooming flowers, hopeful doctors, and the man I had once thought I'd lost forever, I chose, for just a moment, not to think about any of it. Because the real battle had already been fought, and I was still here, still standing, still fighting. The day of the trial arrived cloaked in overcast skies and tension so thick it clung to your skin. I hadn't slept the night before. Instead, I lay awake in the quiet hospital suite, staring at the ceiling, listening to the slow rhythm of Amelia's heartbeat on the monitor beside me. That sound had become my anchor. Proof that life still pulsed through the wreckage of everything that had been torn apart. Charles sat in the corner chair, suit pressed, tie slightly crooked, eyes sunken from worry and shame. Neither of us spoke. We didn't need to. This wasn't just about facing Vanessa in court. This was about facing everything we had allowed to fester behind the closed doors of our marriage. Lies, ambition, guilt, cowardice. Dr. Caldwell insisted on accompanying me for medical reasons, and I was grateful for her presence. She helped ease me into the wheelchair, checked my vitals twice, and gently placed a blanket over my lap before we left the suite. My father walked beside us, a quiet wall of strength in his tailored navy coat, and Charles trailed behind, stiff and solemn, like a man about to deliver himself to judgment. The courthouse was a hive of noise and flashing cameras. Reporters shouted questions. Paparazzi lenses zoomed in on my tired eyes, my hospital bracelet, my swollen belly. Charles shielded me as best he could, but the damage was done. Somewhere, even now, my photo was already going viral. The poisoned wife faces her attacker. Inside, everything felt colder. The marble floors gleamed too bright, the wooden benches too hard. But it was the silence that gnawed at me, the hush before justice was summoned. Judge Everett Bradford presided, a tall man with a grave face and no patience for theatrics. He struck his gavel once, and the entire room fell under his command. Vanessa sat at the defense table, dressed in black, her hair pulled back into a tight bun. She looked thinner, but not remorseful. Her eyes scanned the room with calculated precision. When she saw me being wheeled in, she didn't flinch. Instead, she offered a smile, tight-lipped, mocking, as though this were just another gala where she was trying to outshine me. The prosecution wasted no time. They laid out the case with clarity and force. Vanessa Lane, spurned mistress, had methodically plotted to poison me, Grace Middleton Harrington, while I was pregnant, in hopes of eliminating the wife and child she saw as obstacles to her ascent. Harriet was the first to testify. She looked terrified as she took the stand, but her voice, though shaky, held firm. She admitted her role, how Vanessa had manipulated her into sharing details about my routines, my tea preferences, my moments of solitude. She described the vial, Vanessa's odd questions, and the guilt that had since consumed her. The defense tried to paint Harriet as a bitter employee, possibly seeking revenge or deflecting blame, but Harriet didn't back down. Her sincerity, her raw regret, it silenced even the snarkiest remarks from the defense team. Next came the forensic experts. They described the rare compound found in my system, traced it to the vial found in Vanessa's apartment, and detailed the exact moment in the video footage where Vanessa entered the butler's pantry during my birthday party. It was all there. timelines, chemicals, access. Still, Vanessa's lawyers tried to spin it. They claimed the evidence was circumstantial, that someone, perhaps Charles, had planted the vial, that Vanessa was the true victim, used and discarded by a powerful man, and now being scapegoated to protect a crumbling marriage. And then Charles took the stand. I held my breath as he walked up, straight-backed, jaw set. He looked at me once before turning to the jury. Then, in a voice heavier than I'd ever heard, he told them everything. He confessed to the affair, to the deception, to the nights in hotels and the half-truths over dinner. But he also told them about the moment it turned, when he realized that what he thought was desire had become something darker. How Vanessa grew possessive, how she refused to accept boundaries, how, even after he tried to end it, she found ways to show up, to remind him that she wasn't going anywhere. The defense pounced. They painted him as manipulative, accusing him of orchestrating everything to protect his image. But Charles didn't buckle. He admitted his failures, his weakness, his guilt. And then the question came, the one everyone was waiting for. "Mr. Harrington," the defense attorney asked, standing tall and smug, "do you still have feelings for Ms. Lane?" Charles turned to me. His gaze met mine, steady, stripped bare. "No," he said. "I was infatuated, foolish, but that ended the moment my wife nearly died. My only concern now is my wife, my child, and the damage my mistakes have caused." It was the truth, and it shook something loose in me. Then came the moment no one expected. Vanessa stood. Her hands trembled. Her face, once poised and practiced, crumbled into something raw. "You promised me," she screamed, her voice cracking. "You said we'd build a life together. You lied. You all lied." Gas rippled through the courtroom. The judge slammed his gavel. Bailiffs rushed forward. Vanessa sank into her seat, sobbing, her composure shattered. And in that moment, the jury saw not a victim, but a woman, unraveling beneath the weight of her own cruelty. The rest of the trial moved quickly. The defense faltered. Their arguments grew frantic, desperate. The prosecution stood firm. It took the jury less than 2 days to deliver the verdict. Guilty on all counts. Vanessa sat motionless as the words echoed through the courtroom. Her lips parted slightly as though she couldn't quite believe it. The judge delivered her sentence, 15 years in prison with the possibility of parole after 10. A sentence not just for attempted murder, but for destroying the peace of an innocent family. The reporters swarmed again as we exited, but this time I didn't hide my face. I sat taller in the wheelchair, not victorious, just relieved, because justice at last had spoken. That night, back in the hospital, Amelia kicked for the first time strong enough to make me flinch. I placed Charles's hand on my belly, and we both felt it. Our daughter, alive, strong, defiant. And I realized, through all the pain, something precious had survived. So had we. The weeks following the verdict unfolded in strange silence. The kind of hush that fills a home after a storm has passed, not because everything is healed, but because everyone is too exhausted to speak. The Harrington Mansion, once a place buzzing with staff, events, laughter, and champagne toasts, had transformed into something softer, quieter. I came home from the hospital under strict medical supervision. Dr. Bryant Caldwell converted one of the sunlit sitting rooms on the first floor into a recovery suite. Monitors beeped softly. Nurses came and went. The curtains were always open. My body was healing, but my mind, that was another story. I no longer felt like a victim, exactly. But I wasn't quite a survivor either. I was something in between. I was a woman trying to find herself again in a life that no longer looked the same. Charles tried, every day. He was there, hovering just close enough, never forcing conversation. He brought me ginger tea, sealed, verified, trusted, and sat beside me while I drank it. He read to me from Amelia's baby books, his voice unsteady when he got to the lullabies. He ran his hand gently over my arm as I slept, a gesture of care that felt both familiar and distant. One evening, rain tapping gently against the windows, I finally asked him the question I hadn't dared voice in court. "Why her?" The words hung in the air. He was sitting in the armchair beside me, holding a copy of Goodnight Moon, meant for Amelia but unopened. He looked at me slowly, tired eyes, hollow cheeks. "I don't know," he said after a long pause. "At the time it felt like something I needed, a break from responsibility, from the pressure to be perfect." I stared at him. "And what did she give you?" He sighed. "A fantasy, flattery, the illusion of power. It was never real, Grace. Not like us. I see that now. Do you regret it? I asked. He turned toward the window, watching the raindrops race each other. Every single day. That was the first time I believed him. Not because his voice cracked or because he cried, but because for once, he didn't try to defend himself. He didn't offer me excuses, just honesty. We talked more after that, slowly, cautiously, like two people tiptoeing around the edges of a broken mirror, trying not to get cut again. Some nights we reminisced about the beginning, about the surprise engagement at the botanical garden, or how he burned the pancakes the morning after our honeymoon. I smiled at those memories, but my smile always faded too quickly. The truth was, I still didn't know if I could forgive him. Betrayal like his didn't vanish with an apology or a courtroom verdict. It lingered. It echoed. It woke me up in the middle of the night with phantom pains and questions that couldn't be answered. But Amelia? She changed everything. I grew bigger by the day. Each movement she made reminded me that this child, this miracle, wasn't just surviving. She was thriving, and she needed more than a house filled with grief and guilt. She needed laughter, safety, hope. We started preparing the nursery. At first I had the staff handle most of it, picking out the pale yellow paint, the crib, the mobile with tiny stars. But eventually I found myself involved. Choosing the curtains, folding baby clothes, rubbing my belly and whispering promises to the child I hadn't yet met. Charles joined in, never asking, never assuming. He hung bookshelves, built the changing table. Sometimes I caught him staring at the ultrasound photos like they were maps to redemption. Then came the baby shower. Just a small, private affair organized by a few close friends. No press, no parties, just soft music, pastel decorations, and a table full of warm food that smelled like home. I sat by the window, hand resting on my belly, watching the people I trusted filter in. My father, Dr. Caldwell, even Harriet, who had chosen to stay and had since become something of a quiet guardian. Her guilt had evolved into loyalty, and I respected her for owning her part in the chaos. Gifts were opened, laughs were shared, and for the first time in a long while, I felt peace. Not joy, not yet, but peace. The kind that whispers, "You're going to be okay." Charles didn't attend the shower, but later that night, he knocked gently on the nursery door where I was rocking slowly in the glider. "May I?" he asked. I nodded. He stepped in holding a small box. "I know I have no right to give you anything, but it's not for you, it's for her." He handed me the box, and I opened it to find a tiny gold locket. Inside was a picture of the two of us from our wedding, one of the few candid moments where we were laughing with our foreheads pressed together. On the opposite side was a blank oval. "For when she's born," he said quietly, "you can put her picture in there." My hands trembled slightly. "It's beautiful." "She should know where she comes from," he added. "Not just the pain, but the love too." I looked at him then, not as the man who betrayed me, but as the man trying to build something back from the ruins. "I'm trying," he said. "I see that." It wasn't a promise. It wasn't forgiveness, but it was a beginning. Weeks passed, and as the due date neared, Dr. Caldwell began making more frequent visits. The pregnancy was still high risk, but Amelia showed signs of strength, kicking often, responding to music, flipping positions like she had somewhere to be. Charles had taken leave from his company. Public opinion was still recovering, and the press speculated endlessly about whether I would stay or leave. But inside the mansion, none of that mattered. One morning, as I sat reading by the window, Charles brought me a cup of mint tea. He didn't say anything, just set it down beside me. I looked up at him, saw the lines of fatigue on his face, and for the first time in months reached out and touched his hand. "I'm scared," I whispered. He knelt down beside me, his eyes welling with tears. "So am I, but I'm here and I'm not going anywhere." It wasn't romantic, it wasn't sweeping, but it was real. And sometimes, that's all that matters. Because love, when broken, doesn't return in grand gestures. It comes back slowly, through presence, through silence, through tiny acts of redemption that whisper, "I'm still trying. Please don't give up on me yet." And I hadn't. Not completely. Not for me, not for Amelia, and not for the man who was finally learning how to love the right way, one heartbeat at a time. The night Amelia came into the world was unlike anything I could have imagined. It wasn't dramatic in the way movies made birth seem, no frantic rush through traffic or water breaking in a crowded restaurant. No, It started with silence, a deep, expectant kind of quiet that made the ticking of the old grandfather clock in the hallway sound like thunder. I woke around 3 a.m. with a tightness in my lower back, followed by a slow, rolling pressure that radiated through my belly. At first, I didn't think much of it. I had been feeling Braxton Hicks contractions for weeks. I sat up slowly, rubbing my belly, whispering to Amelia, "Not tonight, sweetheart, Mama's too tired." But then another wave came. Stronger, more insistent. Charles stirred beside me. He had been sleeping lightly for months, always half alert, always ready. His eyes blinked open, and without me saying a word, "Is it time?" "I think it is," I whispered. He was already moving before I finished my sentence, calling Dr. Pack Caldwell, alerting the hospital, helping me into the clothes we had laid out weeks ago. A soft gray sweater, maternity leggings, slippers I could barely squeeze into anymore. By the time the ambulance arrived, the contractions were regular, 5 minutes apart, each one like a rolling storm cloud, and I clung to Charles's hand like it was the last solid thing in the world. The EMTs were calm, efficient, kind. They strapped me in, and Charles rode beside me, never letting go of my hand. The city was still asleep outside. A mist hung over the roads like a hush before a song. At the hospital, everything happened fast and slow at the same time. Nurses in pastel scrubs moved around me like clockwork. Vitals checked, IVs inserted, monitors beeping. A cool breeze blew from the overhead vents, and I shivered beneath my thin gown. Charles stood close, whispering to me with that low, earnest voice I had grown to rely on again. "You're strong, Grace. You've always been." I wanted to believe him. The labor dragged on. Hours passed, pain became rhythm, a tidal pull I couldn't escape. At times I screamed, at times I wept silently. But always Charles was there, sweat on his brow, panic in his eyes, but his hands steady. I heard nurses mention Amelia's heart rate, how it dipped during contractions. I saw the concerned crease in Dr. Caldwell's forehead when she examined me. "We may need to intervene if things don't progress soon," she said gently, but I could see the tension behind her smile. It wasn't supposed to be like this. After everything we'd survived, the poison, the trial, the betrayal, I had dreamed of a redemptive, peaceful birth. One where Amelia would arrive like a sunrise after the storm. But peace, it seemed, still made us earn it. By late afternoon, my strength was nearly gone. My voice cracked, my limbs trembled. I felt like I was unraveling. And then, after one final push, I heard it. Not loud at first, more like a chirp. But it was enough to break something inside me wide open. I looked up and saw Amelia, tiny, pink, fierce. Her fists balled, her mouth wide. The nurse laid her on my chest, and I gasped as though I were touching fire and ice all at once. "She's here," I breathed. "She's perfect," Charles whispered. Tears streamed down his face as he cradled us both, pressing his forehead to mine. For a moment, the world outside that hospital room ceased to exist. It was just us, Grace, Charles, and Amelia. A family reshaped by fire but somehow still whole. The following days blurred together. Hospital corridors, visitors with flowers, nurses checking vitals. But what I remember most vividly were the quiet moments. Amelia asleep in the crook of my arm, the way her fingers curled around mine, the softness of her breath against my neck. Each moment was a balm on wounds I didn't know I still carried. Back at the mansion, the nursery welcomed us home like an old friend. The soft yellow walls, the scent of fresh linen, the mobile above the crib spun slowly, casting gentle shadows across the ceiling. We didn't throw a party. We didn't alert the press. We just lived. Hour by hour, feeding, changing, rocking, learning. Charles was a different man. I could see it in the way he held Amelia, afraid to even blink. I caught him awake at midnight more than once, just watching her sleep. He no longer lived behind his ambition or charm. He had stripped himself bare, down to remorse, down to hope. And I wasn't the same either. There were nights I still cried, not because of pain, but because of everything we had been through. The betrayal, the poison, the courtroom, the fear. And still, Amelia was here. Still, I was alive. Still, somehow, we had found our way back to something real. We started attending therapy sessions together again, even bringing Amelia when we could. I was cautious, always, but I was also curious to see if a man like Charles, broken and flawed as he was, could truly rebuild himself. One afternoon, as we sat in the sunroom, Amelia asleep in my lap, Charles turned to me and asked softly, "Do you think you'll ever love me again?" I didn't answer right away. Instead, I looked at our daughter, her tiny chest rising and falling, her lips twitching in dreams. I never stopped loving the version of you I married, I said quietly. I just had to let go of the version who hurt me. He nodded, swallowing hard. I want to be the man you believed in, every day, even when it's hard. And maybe that's what redemption looks like. Not grand apologies, not public declarations, just quiet, daily efforts to become better. For me, for Amelia, for himself. Months passed. The media's attention waned. Cassandra's name faded from the headlines, replaced by newer scandals, newer tragedies. We received word she had begun writing a memoir, but her lawyer denied it. Still, I didn't care. Let her rot in fiction. My truth was here, wrapped in a pink blanket, giggling at the ceiling fan. We were not healed, but we were healing. And in the quiet of each morning, as sunlight spilled across the nursery floor, I let myself believe that maybe, just maybe, we were going to be okay. Because love, real love, doesn't always come in perfect packages. Sometimes it arrives in broken boxes, wrapped in hard lessons, sealed with the strength it takes to forgive. And as I watched Charles whisper lullabies to our daughter, I realized something I hadn't dared admit until now. This wasn't the ending. It was just the beginning. Thank you so much for staying with us until the very end of this powerful story. If you're still here, it means you felt something, and we're deeply grateful for that. This tale isn't just about betrayal, courtroom drama, or even redemption. It's a reminder that life can change in a heartbeat, that trust is fragile, but so is the human heart, and sometimes that fragility is where the deepest strength is born. We all carry wounds. What matters is how we heal, how we rebuild, and who we choose to become afterward. Where are you watching from today? We'd love to know. Drop a comment and tell us your city or country. We truly want to connect with each of you. If this story moved you, inspired you, or simply gave you something to think about, please subscribe to our channel. We share stories that explore the raw emotions behind the headlines, stories that matter. Don't forget to hit the like button and turn on notifications so you never miss a moment. Until next time, stay strong, stay kind, and never underestimate the power of second chances.